So, how much does it really cost to own a car in Singapore? Well, the answer may surprise you. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Car. I'm Utkarsh. Our mission here is two things. One is, of course, keep the spirit of driving alive, and the other is to make car ownership in Singapore, the world's most expensive car market, easy because it's very complicated and as affordable as it can be. And with that, let's get into today's topic. So, let's start with the headline. The headline is this: car ownership in Singapore begins at about $15,000 to $20,000 a year. That's excluding fuel and parking. Begins at 15 to 20,000 and it moves upwards. And while this may sound like a lot, when you do the math on buying a new premium car, say in the UK or US, and replacing it after 3 years, as is the habit, right? You buy a nice car, replace it. You'll realize that the annual cost is not that different. Let's go into the different components. Component number one would be depreciation. This would begin at about 10,000 Singapore dollars a year. I have a separate video and article on how car pricing is calculated in Singapore, so I'll link to that. But the main thing to know is that from a depreciation standpoint, beyond the usual factors that you think of, age, mileage, the price of a new car, there are two extra factors that affect car depreciation in Singapore. These are paper value and new COE value. Again, I have detailed videos on each of these, but let me give you a quick preview. Paper value is the sum total tax rebate that you will receive to deregister the car from Singapore. And this is calculated on the initial tax based on the car, based on what was paid for the car. So it's a theoretical value because you may be planning to use the car and not deregister it. But yet the theoretical value of what you would get back from the Singapore government when you deregister it, it serves as a floor for the minimum value you can get for the car. So a car can never be entirely worthless, right? You would still get back the paper value. COE, Certificate of Entitlement, is the current cost of the 10-year permission to register a new car. So if a COE goes up, new car prices go up. Again, refer to my article and video on car pricing. And when a new car price goes up, used car prices, which are pegged to it, kind of go up as well. So Singapore is a strange country where sometimes you can make money on a car. And I'll tell you a real story. I've also made money on a car a couple of times, but I'll tell you the best example, which is of a friend of mine. This is from many, many, many years ago. So in 2009, when the financial crisis happened, COE dropped to $1. Remember I told you it's about $100,000 right now? It dropped to $1. And he bought a brand new Honda Civic for $69,000. Still a lot to pay for a Civic, but you remember you're paying import duties, etc. And what happened is 4 years later, COE had gone up. This was 2013ish. COE had gone up to like $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. And the new Honda Civic was priced at about $140,000, $150,000. So because a new car is now $150,000, a used 4-year-old car is about $90,000. So he bought his car for $69,000 and sold it for $90,000. I mean, this is an extreme illustration, and most people will lose money while owning a car in Singapore. But this just illustrates the vagaries of the system and why this channel exists, honestly, because you need to understand the system before you go into buying something that expensive here. Okay, now with these caveats in mind on depreciation, I think you have a starting point to look at the classifieds, SG Carmart, so on and so forth. Now you will notice that cars are beginning at a depreciation about 10,000, as I mentioned. Now how is this depreciation calculated? It's calculated assuming an ownership period all the way till the end of the COE. All the way till the end of the 10 years. If it's a 5-year-old car, 5 years left. If it's a 6-year-old car, 4 years left, and so on. And for cars under 10 years old, the depreciation is calculated assuming you will get back 50% of the ARF paid. Now we'll get into all of these terms. This is the initial import tax paid on it. So just remember, when you're seeing a depreciation number in SG Carmart, it's assuming that you will get back some paper value, which is 50% of the ARF additional registration fee paid. Go to my video which explains all of these terms. But for a car that's over 10 years old, and we'll get into how cars get over 10 years old, how they re-buy a new COE, we'll talk about that separately. But remember, from a depreciation standpoint, for a car that's over 10 years old, the assumption is you get back zero. So depreciation is calculated assuming that you get back zero. Okay. So Also note, while calculating depreciation, these websites do not include body value. Body value is the value you get back for the body of the car, and it can vary. It can be as little as $1,000 or $2,000. It can be as high as $10,000 or $20,000. But usually, unless you own a very, very rare model, say some Porsche 911s, which are very desirable, usually you'll get back maybe $1,000 to $5,000. I mean, I got back $2,000 for an Alfa Romeo. I got back about $6,000 to $7,000 for a Mercedes E-Class. So just giving you a range there. Okay, so that's the first component, which is depreciation. Let's go to component number 2, which is road tax. Now, road tax can be between, as low as $300, $400 and as high as $10,000. Why that variation? This is because road tax, as it's structured in Singapore, essentially works like a wealth luxury tax. It's calculated based on the engine capacity of internal combustion cars and theoretical engine capacity calculated based on the power figure for electric cars. And this road tax, which is calculated based on engine capacity, the road tax goes up exponentially as engine capacity goes up. So let's illustrate this again. A 1 liter car, a 1000cc car, will pay 392 Singapore dollars a year on road tax. Not too bad, comparable to what you would pay in any country. Go up to 2000cc, $392 becomes $1,214 for 2000cc. Go up to 3000cc, it almost doubles to $2,386. Go on to an extreme level, say you go on to 6600cc, a Rolls Royce, it goes to $8,000. So you see, 1 liter car, $400, 2 liter car, $1,000, 3 liter car, more than $2,000, and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting how it goes up. Now, this has implication beyond wealth and luxury tax. Let's look at electric cars. Right? What happens with electric cars is that electric cars are calculated based on the theoretical engine capacity. So they look at the power of an electric car. Say an electric car makes, say, 200 horsepower, and they'll say, okay, to make 200 horsepower, you probably need a 2.5 liter or a 3 liter engine. The formula isn't perfectly clear, but you can calculate it using the tools on the website. It's kind of predetermined by the government's rules. So electric cars road tax based on the theoretical size of the engine, which doesn't really exist. Now, remember this, electric cars are heavy. So electric cars tend to require more power to determine the same performance, to provide the same performance, because electric cars, have a big battery, they end up weighing a lot more. So what this means is, like to like, for the same level of performance, you have a lot more power in an electric car. So you're ending up paying a lot more money in road tax for electric cars, for like to like. It gets a little bit worse, because on top of this structural problem, electric cars pay an additional flat component of road tax, which is theoretically to make up for the loss of tax revenue. So we'll talk a little bit in a separate video, which I'll probably make, on Singapore's approach to electric cars. There are some incentives, but there are some disincentives like this one. So very interesting. So I'm going to illustrate this electric car thing again with an example. Let's compare a Tesla Model 3. Everyone knows this car. Let's compare the long range with the BMW 3 Series 340i. I just chose the M340i because it's a comparable in performance to a Tesla Model 3 long range. They do 0 to 100 in about 4.5 seconds. So the BMW pays $2,386 in road tax because it has a 3 liter engine, 2996 or 2999 to be precise. And the Tesla pays $5,212. So more than double the road tax for same performance on an electric car. There's another side note, diesel cars. Diesel cars pay multiple of what petrol cars would pay for the same capacity. So they multiply a little bit higher. In general, Singapore is not very diesel friendly, but just something for you to know. Okay, so we've talked to two components, depreciation, road tax. Let's talk insurance. Insurance is another significant variable in the cost of car ownership in Singapore. It depends on two factors, your model of car and your own profile driving history. I think this is similar to other countries. I'll illustrate this with two examples from my own driving history. My first car, bought when I was 25 years old, was a Volkswagen Scirocco coupe, a hatchback coupe. My age, 25, profile, male, single, combined with the kind of car, sports car, not really, but it's kind of considered a sports car. Because of all of this, my insurance premium was 3,800 Singapore dollars. I had to literally sell my motorcycle at the time to pay for it, but that's a different story. It can get worse if you buy something like a BMW M3 Coupe or Subaru WRX Impreza. you could be looking at $7,000, $8,000, especially if you're young. But let's look at my current car. So currently I have a pretty powerful car. In fact, it's twice as powerful as my Scirocco. My Scirocco made 160 horsepower. This car makes 326. It's a BMW 740 Li, long wheelbase, 7 Series. It's classified as a luxury limousine because it is, right? Mostly 7 Series are driven by older people for comfort. Never mind that it's super powerful, and never mind that, when we look at performance figures, it's pretty good. So nonetheless, that's how the car is classified. On top of that, I am now 38. I am married. I have 50% no claim discount NCD. This is a term you'll see bandied about, which means I have not made a claim in 5 years. I have a good driver discount as well because I have not had any traffic violations, etc. Married, of course. So because of all of these reasons, my insurance premium now is $900. $900 versus $3,800. So you can see how the insurance premiums vary. You really have to go and check. And you have to check whether if you are coming from another country, whether your good driver discount or if you have something similar to no claim discount, whether it carries over, you need to really check. It's not for sure. Okay. So there we go. Those were the 3 components, right? 3 main components. And then, of course, parking, fuel will come on top. But that's the same for any car in any country. The only thing to notice in Singapore, parking is surprisingly affordable for such a metropolitan city. If you were to compare it to central London or central New York or Hong Kong, Singapore parking is way cheaper. So it's just something to note. The other thing I want to talk about here is interest rates. So remember, when you buy a car in any other country, you'll be paying, I think, 6, 7, 8%. Countries like India, you can pay up to 10% in interest rates for cars. In Singapore, interest rates were as low as 1.98% at one point in time. And even right now, as we speak, they're at 2.68 to 2.98. So you can see interest rates are lower. So when you actually the actual cost of the car, actual cash out, beyond theoretical depreciation, all of that, you will notice that that helps. Now, beyond this, there's another cheat code. The cheat code is used cars. And I'll make another video talking this in more detail. Now, in general, all over the world, it isn't exactly revelatory to say that used cars represent better value than new cars. We know this. But in Singapore, this takes altogether different dimension. Now, there are 2 things. One is the absolute quantum of car pricing. We talked here. This is the country of the 200,000 Honda Accord, 150,000 Toyota Corolla, $400,000 5 Series, $1 million Range Rover. So the quantums we're talking about are quite high. And secondly, another reason why this is different in Singapore is the very high quality of used cars. Why is this? Most cars in Singapore do not leave the country. They basically drive in the city which is like a Disneyland. Some people call it Disneyland versus the rest of the world because it is so well manicured. Infrastructure is great, roads are great, and most of the cars never leave. And most of the cars are new because every 10 years you have to either cars have to pay again to stay for 10 years or they leave. So all used cars here are in incredible good condition, like incredible, right? And usually they're serviced because first 5 years, most cars here have a warranty. Right? And if you have a warranty and a free servicing program, why wouldn't you just use the dealer? So compared to any other countries where you can have all sorts of used cars, all sorts of cowboys doing whatever, not all sorts of road conditions. Think of how road conditions are, for example, where I come from in India. Singapore used cars are very, very different, right? So that's one thing. So that's one important thing to know. There's also the cost of repair, right? Because a lot of people who own used cars, often they don't repair because the cost of the car and cost of repair can be disproportionate. But in Singapore, cars are so expensive that somebody who can afford a car, even a used car, can usually afford the repair, right? And again, I want to illustrate all of this with my own example of why a used car makes so much sense, right? So my 7 Series, when it was launched, it set back its first owner about between $450,000 to $500,000 depending on option. Now, it appeared on the used market 8 years later. 8-year-old, you may think it's an 8-year-old car. But here's the thing. 8 years later, it shows up with only 80,000 kilometers, 80 something, 50,000 miles, and for those of you from the UK or the US. And I looked through many different 7 Series. All of them were good. This one was incredible because the interior was as good as a car that's maybe done 10,000 kilometers, 20,000 kilometers. It had full service history, serviced every 5,000 kilometers, more than I would do, honestly. But basically, clearly the previous owner was either fastidious or they had, or they had, a very incredible servicing package, so they kept using it. And this car, which cost $450,000 or $500,000 new, cost me $90,000. It gets better because it cost me $90,000. I have about little over a year and 4 months left. Now, guess what? At the end of this year and 4 months, that car is not going to be worth zero. Remember what I told you about getting 50% of the taxes? The car's paper value, floor value, is going to be about $64,000. And this particular car, when I check the export value, because I have these resources, this is how I make a lot of these decisions. This is why I also offer these particular services. The body value for this car is in the range of $8,000 to $10,000. So I'm looking at maybe $73,000, $74,000, $75,000 when I deregister this car in 1 year, 3 to 4 months, which means that I will enjoy a depreciation of about $16,000, $17,000 for 1 year, 3 months or 4 months. I'm enjoying a depreciation of maybe $11,000 to $12,000, maybe $13,000 a year, which is on the very, very, very low end of this market. Now, a lot of people will tell you when you buy a super high luxury car, you have to be careful because they have certain parts. This is where the service history comes in, and this is where not insider, but detailed knowledge comes in. The biggest part that fails on BMW 7 Series, for example, is the air suspension. This particular car, the only one out of the lot that I was looking at, has its air suspension replaced with records. So that potential curveball that would come to me and throw $5,000 or so off my economics is not there, as an example. So then I can buy with confidence. This is kind of what I do as well. I'm kind of obsessed. This is why I've owned 14, 15 cars over the last 13 years or whatever it is in Singapore. But these are the sort of things that you do, right? You kind of find these gaps in the market. You kind of find what works for you. 7 Series works for me because I want something that's comfortable, yet I want something that's fast. That particular 7 Series generation has carbon fiber built into its body. That's why it's very light. These are the sort of stupid, obsessive things that I do. And you need to basically combine what you require. What is the right car for you? What is the right car for you in the context of the Singapore market? Because different things are priced differently. What is the right age of car for you? What to look out for? It's a very, very complex thing. Unfortunately, I'm obsessed by. But because of that, I can enjoy a car in a very similar depreciation. I get it. It's not new, but it's in incredible condition. I can enjoy it pretty much the same price as I would in the US or in Singapore. Sorry, in the UK. So that's what it is. That's kind of what I do. And hopefully this article, or rather this video, and I have the article as well on my website, has been helpful for you. There will be plenty more. All these resources are free. But of course, if you want me to apply all of this to your specific situation, I offer that as well as a private consulting. I've been doing it with my friends for years. Like I've been doing it for 15 years with my friends. But, I actually thought that rather than it being an informal thing that only a few people can benefit by, let's turn it into a proper service and let's see whether folks can avail of it. I mean, market is complex enough and expensive enough that it would make a lot of sense for you. All right, folks, hope this was helpful and I'll see you next time.